The emergency beacon cut through the static like a knife through silence. Commander HFY of the Galactic Defense Coalition stared at the holographic display, her four eyes narrowing as she processed the desperate message from Kepler 442b. Coalition Command. This is Colonel Martinez of the 3rd Terran Marine Expeditionary Force. We are under heavy assault by Vorthak raiders. Estimated enemy force, 12,000 hostiles with heavy armor support. Our position is compromised. We have civilians to evacuate. Request immediate reinforcements. The message repeated twice more before cutting to static. Around the command center of the massive coalition dreadnought Unity's dawn, alien officers from a dozen different species exchanged worried glances. Kepler 442b was a frontier colony world, home to nearly 50,000 settlers from various species. If it fell to the Vorthak raiders, it would be a devastating blow to coalition expansion efforts. What forces do we have available for immediate deployment? HFY asked her tactical officer, a crystalline being whose species communicated through harmonic frequencies. The officer's response resonated through the bridge's translation systems. The nearest coalition fleet is 6 days out. The Altarian 7th Fleet could reach Kepler 442b in 4 days, but they're already engaged with Vorthak forces in the Rigel sector. HFY's mandibles clicked in frustration. The Vorthak supremacy had been expanding aggressively for months, their hit-and-run tactics stretching coalition forces thin across multiple fronts. The raiders were known for their brutality. They took no prisoners and left no survivors. What about the humans? Asked Lieutenant Commander Throck, a massive being from a high-gravity world. They have forces in this sector. The tactical officer's harmonics shifted to a dismissive tone. The nearest human vessel is the transport ship Determination. It's carrying only a single squad of 12 soldiers. Hardly sufficient for a planetary defense operation against 12,000 raiders. HFY had worked with humans before. They were a relatively new species to the coalition, having joined only 2 decades ago. Most senior officers still questioned their military capabilities. Humans were smaller than most warrior species, lacked natural armor or claws, and their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. However, HFY had seen human Marines in action during the Centauri Station incident. They had an unusual approach to warfare that often surprised their enemies. Open a channel to the Determination, she ordered. The holographic display shifted to show a human face. Captain Sarah Chun appeared to be in her early 40s by human standards, with short black hair and intense dark eyes. Her uniform bore the insignia of the Terran Space Navy. Captain Chun, this is Commander HFY of Coalition Command. We've received a distress call from Kepler 442b. Our nearest fleet is 4 days out. Can your vessel respond? Captain Chin's expression remained calm as she reviewed the tactical data being transmitted. Commander, we're only carrying a single squad. 12 Marines against 12,000 raiders isn't exactly favorable odds. I understand your concerns, Captain. However, you're the only coalition asset in range. Even a small force might be able to assist with civilian evacuation or provide support until our main fleet arrives. Chin studied the data for several more seconds. Around the coalition bridge, officers waited for her inevitable refusal. It would be foolish for any species to commit such a small force against overwhelming odds. We'll be there in 18 hours, Chin said simply. The bridge fell silent. HFY blinked all 4 eyes in surprise. Captain, did you understand the enemy force strength? 12,000 hostiles. Yes, ma'am. 12,000. We've handled worse. Before anyone could respond, the transmission ended. The holographic display returned to the tactical overview of Kepler 442b, where red indicators showed Vorthak vessels in orbit and landing forces spreading across the planet's surface. Did she say they've handled worse? Throck rumbled in disbelief. 12 humans against worse than 12,000 enemies? The tactical officer's harmonics carried skeptical overtones. Perhaps their translation systems malfunctioned. No rational species would commit such a small force to certain destruction. HFY wasn't so sure. She had studied human military history as part of her coalition training. The files were filled with accounts that seemed impossible. Small human forces achieving victory against overwhelming odds through tactics that other species considered either brilliant or insane. The Battle of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held off hundreds of thousands. The Siege of the Alamo, where fewer than 200 defenders fought against thousands. Rorke's Drift, where barely over 100 British soldiers fought off 4,000 Zulu warriors. But those were historical accounts, possibly exaggerated over time. This was real, happening now, with the lives of 50,000 colonists hanging in the balance. 18 hours later, the Determination dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. HFY watched through long-range sensors as the small human transport ship accelerated toward the embattled planet. Vorthack ships immediately moved to intercept, their massive hulls bristling with weapons designed to tear apart enemy vessels. The Determination is signaling the Vorthack fleet, reported the communications officer. Put it on speakers, HFY ordered. Captain Chin's voice filled the bridge, calm and professional. Vorthack vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Terran Space Navy. You are in violation of Coalition space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Harsh laughter echoed through the communication channel as a Vorthack commander responded in heavily accented galactic standard. Foolish humans. You send one small ship against our entire fleet? We have 18 heavy cruisers and 47 assault vessels. Surrender now, and we will make your deaths quick. Negative, Chin replied. This is your final warning. Withdraw or be destroyed. The laughter grew louder. You amuse us, human. We will enjoy taking your ship apart piece by piece. The Vorthack fleet began moving into attack formation, their weapons powering up for a devastating barrage. On the Coalition bridge, officers watched in stunned silence as the tiny human transport ship continued on course, apparently oblivious to the massive firepower arrayed against it. Are they insane? Whispered the tactical officer. That ship has minimal armament. It's designed for transport, not combat. HFY leaned forward in her command chair. Something about the humans' behavior triggered a memory from her study of their military doctrine. They rarely did anything without careful planning, even when their actions seemed reckless. The first Vorthack salvo lit up space with energy beams and projectile weapons. The Determination twisted through the barrage with surprising agility, its engines glowing white-hot as it pushed beyond normal operational parameters. Return fire from the human ship seemed pathetic in comparison, a few energy bolts that barely scratched the Vorthack shields. But then, something unexpected happened. One of the Vorthack heavy cruisers shuddered as multiple explosions rippled along its hull. Another raider vessel simply disappeared in a brilliant flash of light. What happened? HFY demanded. Replay the engagement. The tactical display rewound and played the attack in slow motion. The human ship's shots had indeed been minimal and seemingly ineffective. But hidden among those energy bolts were something else, small, fast-moving objects that had penetrated the Vorthack shields and delivered devastating payloads to critical systems. Missiles, breathed the tactical officer. But they're so small our sensors barely detected them. How can such tiny weapons cause such damage? HFY was beginning to understand. Human military doctrine emphasized efficiency and precision over raw firepower. Those weren't ordinary missiles. They were probably antimatter warheads or some other exotic human technology designed to maximize damage while minimizing size and detectability. The Vorthack fleet was now in full combat mode, dozens of ships converging on the Determination. But the human vessel continued its impossible dance through the enemy formation, its small weapons systematically targeting critical systems. Each hit disabled or destroyed ships many times larger than itself. Impossible, Throck rumbled. How can one small ship fight an entire fleet? The answer came as the Determination suddenly split apart. What had appeared to be a single transport vessel was actually a sophisticated modular design. The main hull continued toward the planet while smaller sections detached and engaged different portions of the Vorthack fleet. Each module was apparently a warship in its own right, using advanced stealth technology to remain hidden until the moment of attack. Within 30 minutes, the Vorthack fleet was in full retreat. 8 heavy cruisers and 23 assault vessels had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining ships fled toward the system's edge, their commanders apparently deciding that fighting humans was more expensive than they had anticipated. This is Captain Chun to Coalition Command. came the transmission from the planet's surface. Orbital space is secure. Beginning ground operations. Zexhai stared at the tactical display in amazement. The humans had just destroyed nearly half of a major Vorthak raider fleet with a single transport ship. But now came the real challenge. 12 Marines against 12,000 ground forces. Captain Shun, what's your assessment of the ground situation? Zexhai asked. We're reviewing reconnaissance data now, Commander. The Vorthak have established 3 major staging areas around the primary colony sites. They're using standard raider tactics, overwhelming numbers supported by heavy armor. Our forces are already in position. In position for what? There are only 12 of you. 12 is enough, Commander. We'll have this wrapped up in 6 hours. The transmission ended, leaving the Coalition bridge in stunned silence. Zexhai found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about human military capabilities. Either Captain Shun was delusional, or humanity possessed combat abilities far beyond what most Coalition species suspected. Down on Kepler 442b, the reality was about to become clear. The 12 human Marines of Bravo Squad had been preparing for this kind of operation their entire careers. They weren't just soldiers. They were the result of centuries of human military evolution, trained to operate in the most hostile environments against impossible odds. As night fell across the planet's largest continent, 12 humans began to move through the darkness toward their objectives. The Vorthak raiders were about to learn why reinforcing a human position wasn't about numbers. It was about unleashing humanity's greatest weapon, their refusal to accept defeat. Sergeant Major Marcus Rodriguez checked his squad's position one final time. Around him, 11 of the most lethal fighters humanity had ever produced prepared their equipment with methodical precision. Each Marine carried enough firepower to level a city block, but their real weapons were their training, their intelligence, and their absolute determination to protect the innocent civilians counting on them. Remember, Rodriguez whispered into his comm unit, we're not here to match their numbers. We're here to make them regret they ever heard of humans. Let's show these raiders what happens when they threaten our people. In the distance, Vorthak campfires dotted the landscape like malevolent stars. 12,000 alien warriors celebrated their anticipated victory, unaware that their doom was walking toward them through the darkness. The real battle was about to begin. Sergeant Major Marcus Rodriguez lay motionless in the tall grass, observing the largest Vorthak encampment through his enhanced vision scope. 3,000 raiders had established their command center in what used to be the colony's agricultural district. Their massive forms moved between hastily constructed shelters, their natural armor plates gleaming in the firelight. The Vorthak were apex predators from a high-gravity world, standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick, chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect most conventional weapons. Their claws could tear through steel, and their pack-hunting instincts made them formidable opponents. What they lacked in technology, they made up for in raw physical power and savage cunning. Overwatch, this is Ground Leader, Rodriguez whispered into his throat mic, target assessment complete. Count 3,000 hostiles at Grid 77. Heavy weapons platforms detected at the perimeter. Copy, Ground Leader. Came the reply from Corporal Lisa Park, positioned 2 kilometers away on a rocky outcrop. I have eyes on the eastern approach. Spotting for you. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Park was one of the finest marksmen humanity had ever produced, capable of hitting targets at ranges that defied belief. Her rifle wasn't just a weapon. It was an extension of her will, guided by computer-assisted targeting systems and powered by ammunition that could punch through tank armor. Ghost Team, report, Rodriguez continued. Ghost Leader here, came Staff Sergeant Chun Wei's voice. We're in position at the supply depot, counting approximately 400 guards and enough ammunition to level a continent. Ready to light the fireworks. Shadow Team. Shadow Team ready, replied Sergeant Maria Santos. We've got the motor pool surrounded. 200 guards, 50 heavy vehicles. Explosive charges are set. Rodriguez checked his tactical display, a holographic projection that showed the positions of all 12 squad members scattered across a 100-square-kilometer area. To any conventional military mind, the deployment looked suicidal, tiny human dots surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces. But this wasn't conventional warfare. This was human warfare, where the impossible became routine. The squad had spent the past 4 hours infiltrating Vorthack positions using advanced stealth technology and tactics refined through generations of asymmetric combat. Each Marine carried equipment worth more than most starships: adaptive camouflage that could mimic any environment, personal shields that could deflect energy weapons, and weapons systems that represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. "Intel team, what's the civilian status?" Rodriguez asked. "Intel leader here," replied Technical Sergeant David Kim from his position near the main colony. "Most civilians have been herded into the central plaza. Approximately 8,000 hostiles guarding them. The raiders haven't begun executing prisoners yet, but their commander is getting impatient." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. The Vorthack supremacy had a reputation for brutality that was legendary even among the galaxy's most violent species. They believed that fear was a weapon, and they cultivated terror through acts of shocking cruelty. If they decided the civilians were more trouble than profit, the massacre would begin within hours. "Time to work," Rodriguez murmured. "All teams, initiate Operation Thunderstrike. Sequence Alpha in 3, 2, 1, execute." The night exploded into chaos. Corporal Park's first shot traveled 3 kilometers through the darkness and struck a Vorthack ammunition depot with surgical precision. The antimatter charge she had loaded into her rifle was smaller than a human fingernail, but when it detonated, the resulting explosion vaporized everything within a 200-meter radius and sent a mushroom cloud climbing toward the stars. The blast was the signal for coordinated hell to break loose across the planet's surface. Staff Sergeant Chin's Ghost team had spent 2 hours placing explosive charges throughout the Vorthack supply depot with the patience of master craftsmen. When the charges detonated in carefully timed sequence, the chain reaction consumed enough military supplies to equip an army. Secondary explosions continued for 20 minutes as stored weapons and fuel created a fireworks display visible from orbit. Sergeant Santos led Shadow Team in a lightning assault on the motor pool that demonstrated the devastating efficiency of human close-quarters combat. The 4 Marines moved through the facility like deadly phantoms, their weapons systems synchronized through neural links that allowed them to fight as a single organism. Vorthack guards who had dominated battlefields across the galaxy found themselves outmatched by opponents who seemed to predict their every move. Santos herself was a master of multiple martial arts forms that had been adapted for combat against alien species. Her powered armor amplified her strength to superhuman levels while maintaining the speed and flexibility that made human fighters so unpredictable. She flowed between opponents like water, her energy blade carving through chitinous armor as if it were paper. "Contact front," shouted Private Thompson as his position was overrun by 50 Vorthack warriors who had tracked his infiltration route. What should have been a death sentence became a masterclass in human defensive fighting. Thompson's armor systems activated automatically, projecting a personal force field while his integrated weapons systems engaged multiple targets simultaneously. His rifle fired armor-piercing rounds while his shoulder-mounted missile pods launched micromunitions that found weak spots in Vorthack exoskeletons with computer-guided precision. But it was Thompson's training that truly made the difference. Human military doctrine had been developed through centuries of fighting against superior numbers and greater individual strength. Every technique, every tactic, every piece of equipment was designed to maximize the advantage of human intelligence and adaptability. He moved constantly, using the terrain to break up enemy formations and create crossfire opportunities. His suit's tactical computer provided real-time analysis of enemy movements, suggesting optimal positions and predicting attack vectors. When 3 Vorthack warriors tried to flank him simultaneously, Thompson triggered a gravity grenade that altered local gravitational fields and sent his attackers tumbling helplessly through the air. "This is impossible," snarled the Vorthack field commander as reports flooded in from across the battlefield. 12 humans cannot fight 12,000 of us." But the reports kept coming. Ammunition depots destroyed. Vehicle parks eliminated. Communication centers offline. Supply lines severed. Command posts vaporized. And everywhere, the same pattern, small groups of humans appearing from nowhere, striking with devastating precision, then vanishing before Vorthack forces could respond effectively. The Vorthack had prepared for conventional warfare against a numerical equivalent enemy. They had not prepared to fight an opponent who treated conventional tactics as merely the starting point for innovation. Sergeant Major Rodriguez led the assault on the command center with methodical precision that reflected decades of combat experience. His three-person fire team approached the heavily fortified position using routes that avoided sensor coverage and guard patrols. When they finally struck, it was with the focused violence of a surgical strike. Rodriguez himself carried weapons that represented the cutting edge of human military technology. His primary rifle fired caseless ammunition guided by artificial intelligence, with each round capable of adjusting its trajectory mid-flight to hit moving targets. His backup weapons included energy projectors that could overload alien nervous systems and sonic disruptors that could shatter chitin at the molecular level. Private Johnson provided suppressive fire with a squad automatic weapon that fired at rates exceeding 6,000 rounds per minute. The stream of projectiles created an impenetrable wall of death that forced the Vorthack defenders to seek cover while Rodriguez and Private Mitchell flanked their positions. Mitchell specialized in demolitions and electronic warfare. His pack contained devices that could hack alien computer systems, disrupt communications, and turn enemy weapons against their own users. As the team fought their way into the command bunker, Mitchell systematically dismantled the Vorthack command and control network. Rodriguez to all teams. The sergeant major called as his group secured the enemy command center. Primary objectives accomplished. Beginning Phase 2. Phase 2 was where human warfare truly distinguished itself. Most species focused on destroying enemy forces through direct confrontation. Humans understood that the enemy's will to fight was often more important than their ability to fight. Technical Sergeant Kim's intel team had been gathering electronic intelligence throughout the battle, intercepting Vorthack communications, and analyzing their command structure. Now they began broadcasting carefully crafted psychological warfare messages that exploited known Vorthack cultural fears and superstitions. The messages described humans as unstoppable demons who could appear anywhere and kill anything. They included detailed accounts of the Knight's defeats, emphasizing the supernatural abilities of human warriors and the futility of resistance. The broadcasts were accompanied by recordings of Vorthack death screams and the sounds of weapons that their species had never encountered before. "The humans are everywhere," came one intercepted transmission from a Vorthack patrol. "They move like ghosts and strike like lightning." Commander Zexthal's entire company was destroyed by only 2 of them. "Impossible," replied the Vorthack Central Command. "No species can fight with such power." "See for yourself," the patrol leader snarled. "The supply depot is gone. The motor pool is destroyed. Half our communications network is offline. And we still haven't seen most of them." The psychological impact was exactly what Rodriguez had planned. The Vorthack supremacy's military doctrine was based on overwhelming force and intimidation. When they encountered an enemy who could not be overwhelmed or intimidated, their confidence began to crumble. But the humans weren't finished. Corporal Park had relocated to a new position and was now providing precision fire support that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Her shots came from impossible angles and hit targets that should have been protected by cover or distance. Each round was a statement that nowhere was safe from human reach. The Vorthack began pulling back from their forward positions, consolidating their forces around the civilian detention center. It was a tactical mistake born of desperation, but Rodriguez had anticipated it. Concentrating their forces made the raiders easier targets for the weapons systems his team had been saving for the final assault. "All teams, converge on the civilian detention site," Rodriguez ordered. "Remember the rules of engagement. No civilian casualties. Every round you fire is being watched by 8,000 innocent people who are counting on us to be perfect." The final approach began as dawn broke over Kepler 442b. 12 human Marines moved toward 8,000 Vorthack raiders who were holding 8,000 civilian hostages in the colony's central plaza. The odds were more hopeless than ever, but the humans had never been more confident. They had spent the night proving that in warfare, numbers mattered less than skill, technology mattered less than tactics, and strength mattered less than the willingness to use it intelligently. The Vorthak were about to learn the final lesson in human combat doctrine. When humans said they would protect something, they meant it with a dedication that bordered on the religious. And when someone threatened what humans protected, they discovered why humanity had never lost a war that truly mattered to them. The central plaza of New Geneva Colony had been transformed into an open-air prison. 8,000 civilians from dozens of species huddled together under the watchful eyes of their Vorthak captors. Men, women, children, and elderly beings from across the galaxy sat on the hard concrete, their faces showing the strain of a night filled with terror and uncertainty. High Commander Kethvar stood on a makeshift platform overlooking his prisoners, his massive frame casting a shadow across the terrified crowd. The Vorthak leader's battle-scarred exoskeleton told the story of decades of conquest and carnage. His species had ruled through fear for generations, and he had personally overseen the destruction of 17 colonies. People of this pathetic settlement, Kethvar's voice boomed across the plaza, amplified by stolen human communication equipment. Your coalition forces have abandoned you. Your defenders have failed. You belong to the Vorthak supremacy now. A young human child began crying in the crowd. Her mother, a colony administrator named Janet Morrison, held her daughter close and whispered soothing words that she didn't believe herself. Around them, alien families did the same in dozens of different languages and cultural traditions. Silence, Kethvar roared. You will learn proper respect for your new masters, or you will serve as examples for others. But, even as he spoke, the Vorthak commander felt a growing unease. His forces had lost contact with 7 major positions during the night. Ammunition depots had exploded. Vehicle parks had been destroyed. Command centers had gone silent. And, according to the few survivors who had managed to return, all of this devastation had been caused by just 12 human soldiers. It was impossible. Kethvar had studied human military capabilities as part of his preparation for this raid. They were a young species with limited combat experience against galactic-level threats. Their equipment was primitive by Vorthak standards, and their physical capabilities were laughable. A single Vorthak warrior could tear apart 3 humans in hand-to-hand combat. Yet somehow, these 12 humans had fought 8,000 of his finest raiders to a standstill. Commander, his tactical officer approached nervously. The perimeter teams are requesting permission to fall back to the secondary positions. They report continued contact with human forces. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in irritation. How many humans? Unknown, sir. The survivors report being attacked by small groups, sometimes only 1 or 2 individuals. But their weapons? Commander, they're using technology we've never encountered. Energy signatures that don't match any known coalition specifications. Impossible. Coalition intelligence provided complete technical readouts of human military capabilities. Perhaps, sir, but the conversation was interrupted by a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Somehow, someone had accessed their communication network and was broadcasting on all frequencies simultaneously. Vorthak forces, this is Sergeant Major Marcus Rodriguez of the Terran Space Marines. You are surrounded and outgunned. Release the civilians immediately and surrender or face complete annihilation. Harsh laughter echoed across the plaza as Kethvar activated his own communication system. Foolish human. I have 8,000 prisoners and 8,000 warriors. You have 12 soldiers. Simple mathematics suggests that you should be the one surrendering. Math was never my best subject, Rodriguez replied calmly. I prefer practical demonstrations. A supersonic crack split the air as something moved through the plaza faster than sound. The Vorthak warriors standing next to Kethvar simply ceased to exist, vaporized by a projectile that had traveled from somewhere beyond the horizon. The remaining fragments of his armor clattered to the platform like metallic rain. The prisoners screamed and scattered as best they could within the confines of their detention area. Vorthak guards raised their weapons, scanning the surrounding buildings for targets that remained invisible to their sensors. That was a warning shot, Rodriguez's voice continued, still emanating from their own communication equipment. The next one will be aimed at you personally, Kethvar. You have 30 seconds to begin releasing the civilians. Kethvar's mind raced. The shot had come from at least 5 kilometers away, based on the trajectory analysis his armor's computer provided. No known rifle could achieve that kind of accuracy at such range while maintaining enough power to completely destroy a Vorthak warrior's protective gear. You cannot kill all of my forces before we execute the prisoners, Kethvar snarled into his communicator. "Wanna bet?" The plaza erupted into chaos as human forces struck from 12 different directions simultaneously. But this wasn't the wild assault of desperate soldiers making a last stand. This was the carefully orchestrated symphony of a perfectly planned operation. Corporal Park's rifle spoke again from her concealed position, and another Vorthak commander disappeared in a flash of vaporized matter. Her next shot came 3 seconds later, removing a heavy weapons specialist who had been aiming at a group of civilian children. Each round was placed with surgical precision, targeting only Vorthak warriors who posed immediate threats to prisoner safety. Technical Sergeant Kim had spent hours hacking the colony's infrastructure systems, and now those systems turned against their occupiers. Streetlights became laser projectors that carved through Vorthak armor. Water systems became delivery mechanisms for chemical agents that disrupted alien respiratory functions. Even the decorative fountains had been converted into kinetic weapons that launched projectiles with lethal velocity. Staff Sergeant Chin's ghost team struck the eastern perimeter with the fury of a natural disaster. The 4 Marines had armed themselves with weapons specifically designed for urban combat in civilian areas. Energy projectors that could disable opponents without causing collateral damage, sonic disruptors that could knock Vorthak warriors unconscious, and neural scramblers that temporarily shut down hostile nervous systems. Chin himself moved through the enemy formation like a force of nature. His powered armor was painted with adaptive camouflage that made him nearly invisible, while his weapons systems engaged targets with computer-assisted precision. He wasn't just fighting individual Vorthak warriors. He was dismantling their entire command structure with methodical efficiency. Sergeant Santos led Shadow Team in a flanking maneuver that demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of human small unit tactics. The 4 Marines moved as a single organism, their actions coordinated through neural links that allowed them to share sensory data and tactical analysis in real time. Santos herself was a master of close-quarters combat who had adapted traditional martial arts for warfare against alien species. She flowed between opponents like water, her energy blade carving through chitin armor while her integrated weapons systems provided suppressive fire. Behind her, her team provided overlapping fields of fire that made it impossible for Vorthak forces to mount an effective counterattack. But it was Sergeant Major Rodriguez who provided the true demonstration of human tactical superiority. Instead of engaging the enemy directly, he appeared to materialize in the middle of the civilian detention area, moving between hostages with the speed and precision of a professional dancer. "Everyone down," he shouted in multiple languages as his personal defense systems engaged the surrounding Vorthak guards. Force field projectors created protective barriers around groups of civilians, while his armor's integrated weapons systems fired with inhuman accuracy. Rodriguez's rifle seemed to fire in all directions at once, each round guided by artificial intelligence that could predict enemy movements and adjust trajectory mid-flight. Vorthak warriors who tried to target civilian hostages found their weapons disabled by electromagnetic pulses that fried their firing mechanisms. Those who tried to use their natural claws discovered that Rodriguez's armor could generate localized gravity fields that made close combat impossible. Young Janet Morrison watched in amazement as the human soldier seemed to dance through the battlefield, his movements choreographed to protect maximum numbers of civilians while engaging multiple opponents simultaneously. Her daughter had stopped crying and was staring at Rodriguez with the wide-eyed wonder that children reserve for their greatest heroes. "Mama," the girl whispered, "is that man an angel?" "I don't know, sweetie," Janet replied, watching Rodriguez disarm 3 Vorthak warriors with a single spinning maneuver that defied physics. "But I think he might be." Kethvar found himself facing a tactical situation that violated everything he understood about warfare. His forces outnumbered the humans by more than 600 to 1, yet they were being systematically destroyed by opponents who seemed to anticipate their every move. Worse, the humans were achieving their objectives without causing significant civilian casualties, a feat that should have been impossible in such chaotic conditions. "All units, Fall back to defensive positions, he commanded. But his orders were met with confused responses from subordinates who could no longer maintain communication with their scattered forces. Sir, the communication network is compromised, his tactical officer reported. The humans have taken control of our command systems. Then, use backup frequencies. They're controlling those too, sir. And our tactical computers are being fed false information. Half our forces are shooting at ghosts while the real humans attack from unexpected vectors. Kethvar realized with growing horror that he wasn't just losing this battle. He was being outmatched by an enemy whose capabilities exceeded anything in Coalition intelligence files. These weren't the primitive humans described in Vorthak reconnaissance reports. These were warriors whose technology and tactics represented the cutting edge of galactic military science. Private Thompson's voice crackled across the captured communication system as he led his fire team in a devastating assault on the plaza's northern approach. Ground leader, this is Thompson. Western perimeter is secure. Civilian casualties, 0. Enemy casualties, approximately 400. Request permission to begin Phase 3. Permission granted, Rodriguez replied, while simultaneously disarming 2 more Vorthak guards who had been threatening a group of elderly Altarian refugees. All teams, initiate extraction protocols. We need these civilians clear before the real fireworks start. The real fireworks turned out to be something that no Vorthak warrior had ever seen before. Human evacuation procedures had been refined through centuries of urban warfare and disaster response. What looked like chaos was actually a carefully orchestrated ballet that moved thousands of people to safety with impossible speed and efficiency. Holographic markers appeared throughout the plaza, visible only to special contact lenses that Rodriguez's team had been distributing to civilians throughout the battle. The markers created clear evacuation routes that avoided combat zones while leading to designated safe areas where transportation was waiting. But it was the transportation itself that truly demonstrated human logistical capabilities. The same modular technology that had allowed Captain Chen's ship to split into multiple combat vessels had been applied to ground operations. What appeared to be empty air suddenly, filled with transport craft that had been hidden by stealth systems more advanced than anything the Vorthak had imagined possible. This is impossible, Kethvar whispered as he watched thousands of hostages disappear into vehicles that his sensors couldn't detect until they were already airborne. How can they move so many people so quickly? The answer came from Technical Sergeant Kim, whose voice now seemed to emanate from every electronic device in the plaza. It's simple, Kethvar. We planned for this. While you were relying on brute force and intimidation, we were developing solutions to problems you didn't know existed. That's what humans do. We adapt, we innovate, and we never stop improving. Within 20 minutes, the plaza that had contained 8,000 hostages was empty except for Vorthak forces and the 12 human Marines who had somehow orchestrated their evacuation. But even with the civilians safe, the humans showed no signs of withdrawing. Your prisoners are gone, human, Kethvar called out across the plaza. You have achieved your objective. Why do you continue to fight? Rodriguez's response came from directly behind the Vorthak commander, despite the fact that dozens of guards had been watching for exactly such an approach. Because you made a mistake, Kethvar. You threatened innocent people under human protection. That makes this personal. Kethvar spun around to face the human soldier, his natural weapons extending as he prepared for close combat. What he saw instead was something that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his considerably shortened life. Rodriguez stood less than 2 meters away, his armor systems fully activated and his weapons trained on every Vorthak warrior in the immediate vicinity. But it wasn't his equipment that inspired fear, it was his eyes. They held the cold, calculating expression of someone who had made peace with violence and learned to wield it as a precision instrument. Surrender now, Rodriguez said quietly, and some of you might live to see home again. High Commander Kethvar had faced death countless times during his centuries of conquest. He had led charges against fortified positions, fought in single combat against the galaxy's most dangerous predators, and survived battles where entire armies had been destroyed. But, standing in the empty plaza of New Geneva Colony, facing a single human soldier, he felt fear for the first time in his adult life. It wasn't Rodriguez's weapons that inspired terror, though the humans' equipment clearly represented technology beyond Vorthak understanding. It wasn't even the fact that 12 Marines had somehow defeated 8,000 raiders while protecting thousands of civilians. It was something more fundamental, the absolute certainty in Rodriguez's posture that he had already won this fight, and was simply offering his enemies a choice between surrender and annihilation. "You cannot be serious," Kethvar snarled, his mandibles clicking in nervous agitation. "I still command 3,000 warriors. You have 12 soldiers." "I know," Rodriguez replied calmly. "Hardly seems fair to you." Around the plaza, Vorthak forces were beginning to realize that their hostages had vanished with impossible efficiency. What should have been their greatest advantage, the ability to threaten innocent lives, had been neutralized by logistics that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Their defensive positions, carefully chosen to maximize civilian casualties in case of rescue attempts, now offered no protection against enemies who could strike from any angle. "Sergeant Major," came Corporal Park's voice through the tactical communication system, "I count 2,800 hostiles remaining in the immediate area. They're starting to bunch up around the command platform. Want me to thin them out?" "Negative," Rodriguez replied without taking his eyes off Kethvar. "Let them cluster. It'll make the demonstration more impressive." "What demonstration?" Kethvar demanded. Rodriguez smiled, and the expression was more terrifying than any Vorthak battle roar. "The one that's going to convince the rest of your species to leave coalition space permanently." The first sign that something unprecedented was about to happen came from the sky. A low humming sound, barely audible at first, began to grow in intensity. Vorthak warriors looked up to see what appeared to be empty air beginning to shimmer like heat mirages. "Stealth frigates," breathed Kethvar as his armor's sensors finally detected the massive ships that had been hidden above the colony. "How many vessels do you have?" "Enough," Rodriguez replied. "But we're not going to use them. This is personal now, and we handle personal matters personally." Technical Sergeant Kim's voice filled the plaza, broadcast through every communication device the Vorthak carried. "Attention, all Vorthak forces. You are now observing a demonstration of human military technology that will be recorded and transmitted to your home worlds. We recommend you pay close attention, as your survival may depend on understanding what you are about to witness." The demonstration began with Staff Sergeant Chen's ghost team materializing from concealment like deadly phantoms. The 4 Marines had been moving through Vorthak positions for the past hour, placing specialized equipment with the patience of master craftsmen. Now their preparations became apparent as the plaza filled with holographic projections that confused enemy sensors and created false targets throughout the area. But these weren't ordinary holographic decoys. Each projection was backed by solid light technology that made them physically real for brief periods. Vorthak warriors found themselves shooting at enemies that could become solid long enough to fire back, then fade into nothingness when return fire arrived. Chen himself demonstrated the terrifying effectiveness of human adaptive tactics by engaging 50 Vorthak warriors in simultaneous combat. His armor's tactical computer had analyzed their fighting styles during earlier engagements and now predicted their moves with supernatural accuracy. Every attack was countered before it began, every defensive maneuver anticipated and bypassed. "This is impossible," screamed a Vorthak squad leader as Chen seemed to flow through his formation like liquid death. "No biological organism can process information that quickly." "That's where you're wrong," Chen replied, his voice amplified by external speakers. "Humans don't just process information. We become one with our technology. Man and machine working in perfect harmony to create something greater than either could achieve alone." To demonstrate his point, Chen's armor suddenly reconfigured itself, transforming from a humanoid shape into something that resembled a mechanical spider. Additional limbs extended from hidden compartments, each armed with different weapon systems that engaged separate targets simultaneously. His human consciousness controlled the entire assembly through neural interfaces that translated thought into action at light speed. Sergeant Santos provided the next phase of the demonstration by leading Shadow Team in an assault that redefined the concept of impossible odds. The four Marines charged directly into the largest concentration of Vorthak forces, over 1,000 warriors positioned in what should have been an impregnable defensive formation. What followed was a masterclass in human battlefield innovation. Santos and her team didn't fight their way through the enemy formation. They fought over it, under it, and around it using equipment that seemed to ignore fundamental laws of physics. Personal gravity manipulators allowed them to run up walls and across ceilings, attacking from vectors that Vorthak defensive doctrine couldn't address. Phase shift technology let them briefly become incorporeal, passing through solid matter to strike from behind enemy lines. Temporal distortion fields created pockets where the Marines moved at accelerated rates while their opponents seemed frozen in time. "How?" whispered Kethvar as he watched his finest warriors being systematically dismantled by opponents who moved like gods. "How can any species possess such capabilities?" "Evolution," Rodriguez replied matter-of-factly. "Humans have spent our entire history fighting opponents who were bigger, stronger, and more numerous than we were. Every challenge made us smarter. Every defeat taught us new lessons. Every victory showed us what was possible when intelligence was applied to seemingly impossible problems." Private Thompson provided the next demonstration by single-handedly engaging 300 Vorthak warriors who had fortified themselves in the colony's administrative building. Instead of attempting to storm their position, Thompson simply walked up to the main entrance and knocked politely on the door. When the defenders opened fire, expecting to quickly eliminate one foolish human, they discovered that Thompson's armor was equipped with adaptive shielding that analyzed incoming attacks and generated appropriate countermeasures in real time. Energy weapons were absorbed and redirected. Projectile weapons were deflected by magnetic fields. Explosive devices were neutralized by localized gravitational distortions. But Thompson wasn't just defending himself. He was conducting a detailed analysis of every Vorthak weapon system, cataloging their specifications, and developing countermeasures that would make future human forces immune to similar attacks. When he finally returned fire, each shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy, leaving his opponents alive but thoroughly convinced of their complete helplessness. "Please note," Thompson announced through their captured communication system, "that I could have killed all of you within the first 30 seconds. Instead, I chose to demonstrate the futility of resistance while preserving your lives. This mercy is a gift that will not be repeated if your species continues to threaten coalition civilians." The psychological impact was devastating. Vorthak military doctrine was based on the assumption that superior individual strength and overwhelming numbers would always triumph over technological sophistication. They had never encountered an enemy that could neutralize both advantages while simultaneously demonstrating casual contempt for their military capabilities. Corporal Park provided the final element of the demonstration from her position on the distant mountaintop. Her rifle had been configured for non-lethal precision shooting, using rounds that could disable Vorthak warriors without causing permanent injury. But the accuracy she displayed defied comprehension. Park began targeting specific pieces of equipment carried by individual Vorthak soldiers. She shot the communication devices off their armor without scratching the metal beneath. She disabled their weapon systems by placing rounds through firing mechanisms smaller than human fingernails. She even shot the decorative elements off their ceremonial combat gear, leaving the functional components untouched. Each shot was fired from a range exceeding 7 kilometers, through atmospheric conditions that should have made such precision impossible. Yet Park never missed, never hesitated, and never seemed to require more than a few seconds to acquire and engage targets that other species would consider unhittable. "Attention, Vorthak forces." Park's voice carried clearly across the battlefield despite the distance. "I want you to understand something important. Every shot I have fired could have been lethal. Every piece of equipment I have disabled could have been a vital organ. I am demonstrating restraint only because Sergeant Major Rodriguez ordered me to provide you with an educational experience rather than a funeral." The message was clear, and its implications were terrifying. If this single human sniper could disable individual equipment components at impossible ranges, what could she do to living targets? What could 12 such specialists accomplish when they were no longer concerned with preserving enemy lives? Kethvar found himself faced with a tactical reality that his training had never addressed. His forces weren't just being defeated, they were being toyed with by an enemy that possessed capabilities beyond his comprehension. Every aspect of human technology seemed designed to make Vorthak advantages irrelevant while highlighting their weaknesses. "This is your final warning," Rodriguez said quietly, his weapon systems powering up with an ominous whine. "Surrender now, or discover what happens when humans stop playing games." Around the plaza, 3,000 Vorthak warriors looked to their commander for guidance. They had watched 12 humans systematically dismantle their military formations while protecting thousands of civilian hostages. They had witnessed technology that made their own equipment seem primitive by comparison. Most importantly, they had seen the calm professionalism with which their enemies had conducted what should have been an impossible operation. These weren't savage berserkers fighting in desperate fury. These were scientists of warfare who had reduced violence to a precise art form. They had demonstrated the ability to kill or spare with equal precision, to strike from any range or vector, and to coordinate their actions with superhuman efficiency. "Commander," whispered his tactical officer, "our casualties are approaching 70%, and the humans haven't even begun using their heavy weapons. Perhaps we should consider silence." Kethvar roared, but his voice carried less conviction than before. He had built his reputation on never retreating from inferior opponents, but he was beginning to question whether humans actually were inferior. Rodriguez nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. "Very well. You've chosen to do this the hard way." He activated his communication system one final time. "All teams, weapons free. Show them what humanity brings to a real fight." The plaza erupted into a symphony of destruction that redefined the concept of overwhelming force. But this wasn't random violence. It was precision annihilation directed by 12 minds that had been trained to think several moves ahead of any possible opponent. The real demonstration of human military capability was about to begin, and Kethvar finally understood why his species' intelligence reports on human combat effectiveness had been so terrifyingly wrong. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. One moment, 12 human Marines had been demonstrating restraint while dismantling Vorthak forces with surgical precision. The next moment, they had become something else entirely, instruments of destruction that operated with efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. Sergeant Major Rodriguez moved first, his armor systems reconfiguring as targeting computers identified optimal engagement patterns. What had been a demonstration of controlled violence became an exhibition of pure military science. His rifle spoke 12 times in the span of 3 seconds, each round guided by artificial intelligence that calculated trajectory, wind resistance, and target movement with inhuman precision. 12 Vorthak squad leaders ceased to exist, their command structure decapitating itself as neural networks that had coordinated resistance for generations went suddenly silent. But Rodriguez was just the opening note in a symphony of destruction that redefined the concept of overwhelming force. Staff Sergeant Chin's ghost team moved through the remaining Vorthak formations like a force of nature unleashed. The tactical holographic systems that had been providing concealment and confusion now became weapons in their own right. Solid light projections materialized with enough physical presence to deliver kinetic impacts that could shatter chitin armor, while electromagnetic pulse generators disabled enemy equipment faster than conscious thought. Chen himself had become something beyond human limitations. His armor's neural interface allowed him to process battlefield information at computer speeds while maintaining the intuitive understanding of tactics that made humans so unpredictable. He moved through enemy formations like a dancer, each step choreographed to maximize destruction while minimizing exposure to return fire. "Contact! Contact! Contact!" screamed a Vorthak warrior as Chun appeared beside him with impossible speed. The alien's natural reflexes were impressive by galactic standards, but they might as well have been frozen statues compared to human response times enhanced by technology that treated physics as merely a starting point for innovation. Chin's energy blade carved through 3 opponents before the first one realized he was dying. His integrated weapons systems fired in all directions simultaneously, guided by sensors that tracked every enemy movement within a 100-meter radius. When a group of Vorthak warriors tried to coordinate a flanking maneuver, Qin's tactical computer had already predicted their approach and positioned countermeasures that turned their attack into a perfectly orchestrated ambush. Sergeant Santos led Shadow Team in an assault that demonstrated why human close-quarters combat had never been matched by any other species. The four Marines moved as a single organism, their actions coordinated through neural links that allowed them to share sensory data and tactical analysis in real time. Santos herself was poetry in motion, her fighting style adapted from martial arts forms that had been perfected through millennia of human conflict. But these weren't historical techniques. They had been enhanced by technology that allowed her to predict enemy movements, accelerate her reflexes, and strike with force that could shatter materials stronger than steel. She flowed between opponents like liquid lightning, her energy weapons carving through Vorthak armor as if it were paper. Behind her, Private Martinez provided suppressive fire that created zones of absolute death, while Private Jackson flanked enemy positions with weapons that fired guided ammunition capable of changing direction mid-flight to strike targets behind cover. Private Williams demonstrated the terrifying effectiveness of human adaptability by using captured Vorthak weapons against their former owners. But, in human hands, the alien technology became something far more dangerous than its original designers had ever intended. Williams had spent the first part of the battle analyzing enemy equipment, understanding its principles, and developing improvements that increased its effectiveness by orders of magnitude. Impossible, gasped a Vorthak weapons specialist as Williams turned a standard plasma rifle into a precision instrument that could target individual nerve clusters. Those modifications should take days to implement. Human engineering, Williams replied while simultaneously disabling 6 enemy soldiers with shots that left them paralyzed but alive. We don't just use technology, we improve it. Every weapon we capture becomes better than it was before. Corporal Park had relocated to a new position and was now providing fire support that seemed to violate fundamental laws of ballistics. Her rifle fired rounds that could change direction multiple times during flight, allowing her to engage targets that were protected by multiple layers of cover. Each shot was a masterwork of applied physics, guided by computers that could calculate trajectories through three-dimensional space while accounting for gravitational fluctuations, atmospheric density variations, and target movement patterns. Grid reference 77 Alpha. Park's voice carried clearly across the battlefield as she coordinated with other team members. 12 hostiles in defensive formation behind the memorial statue, requesting permission to demonstrate ricochet targeting. Permission granted, Rodriguez replied, while simultaneously engaging 3 Vorthak warriors who had been trying to flank his position. Show them what human marksmanship really means. Park's shot traveled nearly 4 kilometers before striking the side of a building at precisely the correct angle to redirect toward the memorial statue. The round ricocheted twice more, using architectural features as steering mechanisms, before striking the statue's base with enough force to create a precisely shaped fragmentation pattern that disabled all 12 hidden enemies without causing permanent injury. Note: Park announced through the captured communication system. That was a demonstration of non-lethal ricochet targeting. Lethal targeting would have required only one shot through the statue itself. Technical Sergeant Kim provided electronic warfare support that turned the Vorthak's own technology against them with ruthless efficiency. He had spent the battle infiltrating their computer networks, learning their protocols, and identifying vulnerabilities that could be exploited with devastating effect. Now their own communication systems began broadcasting false orders that sent reinforcements to empty coordinates while recall commands scattered defensive formations. Their weapon targeting computers developed mysterious malfunctions that made accurate fire impossible. Even their armor systems began reporting false environmental conditions that triggered emergency protocols at the worst possible moments. Attention, Vorthak forces. Kim's voice seemed to come from every electronic device they carried. You are now experiencing the effects of total information warfare. Your computers belong to us. Your sensors show you what we want them to show. Your weapons fire where we permit them to fire. You are not fighting humans. You are fighting human technology guided by human intelligence, and you cannot win. Private Thompson demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of human defensive doctrine by allowing an entire Vorthack company to surround his position before activating systems that turned defense into offense. Personal force fields projected outward became kinetic weapons that could shatter alien bone structures. Point defense lasers designed to intercept incoming projectiles became precision instruments for disabling enemy equipment. Thompson's armor had been configured for urban warfare, with systems that could use any available material as ammunition for improvised weapons. Debris from damaged buildings became guided missiles. Water from broken pipes became high-pressure cutting tools. Even the air itself could be weaponized through sonic disruptors that could knock Vorthack warriors unconscious from 100 meters away. "This is Staff Sergeant Mitchell," came another voice as the 11th Marine announced his presence with an assault that redefined the concept of individual firepower. Mitchell specialized in heavy weapons and demolitions, carrying equipment that could level city blocks or perform surgical strikes with equal precision. His appearance on the battlefield was marked by explosions that seemed to follow no logical pattern until their cumulative effect became apparent. Mitchell wasn't just destroying enemy positions. He was reshaping the entire tactical environment, creating channels that forced Vorthack forces into predetermined killing zones while simultaneously eliminating their escape routes. "Fire mission complete," Mitchell announced as the last of his carefully placed charges detonated with clockwork precision. "Enemy forces are now concentrated in sectors Alpha through Delta. Recommend immediate exploitation of tactical advantage." The 12th Marine, Private First Class Rebecca Stone, had been providing overwatch and coordination throughout the battle. Now she revealed why human command and control systems were considered among the most effective in the galaxy. Stone's position gave her oversight of the entire battlefield, while her equipment allowed her to coordinate the actions of all 11 team members with precision that made them operate as a single, devastating organism. "All teams, converge on the command platform," Stone directed. "Time to bring this to a conclusion." High Commander Kethvar watched in growing horror as his 3,000 warriors were systematically dismantled by 12 humans who moved with coordination that seemed telepathic. Every tactical doctrine his species had developed over millennia of conquest was being rendered obsolete by opponents who fought with technology and techniques that shouldn't have been possible. "This cannot be happening," he whispered as his personal guard, 50 of the finest warriors his species had ever produced, were eliminated by Sergeant Major Rodriguez in less than 30 seconds. The human moved through them like a force of nature, his weapons systems engaging multiple targets simultaneously while his armor deflected attacks that should have been instantly lethal. "Your mistake," Rodriguez said as he approached the Vorthack commander, stepping over the disabled forms of elite warriors who had been reduced to helplessness, "was assuming that humans fight the same way everyone else does. We don't. We innovate. We adapt. And we never stop improving." Around the plaza, the sounds of combat began to fade as the last pockets of Vorthack resistance were neutralized. 12 human Marines had defeated 3,000 alien warriors while suffering 0 casualties and causing minimal collateral damage to the civilian infrastructure they had been protecting. "Impossible," Kethvar repeated, his voice hollow with shock. "No species can possess such capabilities." "Most species can't," Rodriguez agreed. "But humans aren't most species. We're the result of 4 billion years of evolution on a death world where everything was trying to kill us. We learned to be better than anything that wanted us dead, and we never stopped learning." Technical Sergeant Kim's voice filled the plaza one final time. "Attention remaining Vorthack forces. This engagement has been recorded and will be transmitted to your home worlds as a demonstration of human military capabilities. Please note that 12 Marines accomplished what you have just witnessed. A full human military response would involve millions of such specialists, supported by technology that makes what you have seen today appear primitive by comparison." The implications were staggering. If 12 humans could defeat 3,000 Vorthack raiders, what could a fully equipped human battle fleet accomplish? What would happen if humanity decided to take the war to Vorthack space rather than simply defending coalition territory? "You have a choice," Rodriguez continued, his weapon systems powered down but ready to reactivate in milliseconds. "Surrender now, submit to coalition justice, and live to return home with this warning for your leaders. Or continue fighting, and discover what happens when humans stop demonstrating restraint and start demonstrating finality. Kethvar looked around the plaza at the aftermath of the battle. His invasion force had been reduced to scattered survivors who were more concerned with medical attention than continued resistance. His carefully planned conquest had been turned into a humiliating defeat that would be remembered as a cautionary tale for generations. But, more importantly, he had seen the future of galactic warfare, and that future belonged to humanity. The species that everyone had dismissed as primitive newcomers possessed military capabilities that exceeded those of civilizations thousands of years older. They had turned war into a science, violence into an art form, and destruction into a precision instrument. "I surrender," Kethvar said quietly, his weapons clattering to the ground as his armor's systems powered down. Around him, the surviving Vorthak warriors followed their commander's example. The invasion of Kepler 442b was over, ended not by superior numbers or advanced technology, but by 12 humans who had demonstrated that when reinforcements were needed, humanity didn't send an army. They sent specialists. 6 hours later, Captain Sarah Chun stood in the plaza as coalition transport ships arrived to take the Vorthak prisoners into custody. The 12 Marines of Bravo Squad had accomplished something that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. A perfect victory achieved through superior training, advanced technology, and the uniquely human refusal to accept defeat. "Mission accomplished," Captain Rodriguez reported as his squad assembled for extraction. All civilians evacuated safely. Enemy forces neutralized with minimal casualties. Colonial infrastructure preserved for reconstruction. Chen nodded, unsurprised by the outcome. She had served with these Marines for 3 years and had seen them accomplish impossible missions on a regular basis. What impressed other species as supernatural was simply professionalism to human standards. "Outstanding work, Sergeant Major. The Coalition Command is requesting a full tactical analysis of the operation." Rodriguez smiled. "I'm sure they are. 12 humans against 12,000 aliens probably broke a few assumptions about force multiplication ratios." As the human transport arrived to collect the squad, Chen reflected on the broader implications of what had just occurred. Humanity had demonstrated military capabilities that would reshape galactic politics, showing that they were not just another member species, but a force that could project power across any distance to protect any threatened population. The Vorthak supremacy would think twice before threatening coalition civilians again. More importantly, other potential aggressors would reconsider their assumptions about human military capabilities. The message was clear and unmistakable. When innocent lives were threatened, humanity would respond with overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. The age of testing human resolve was over. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when humanity was fully committed to protecting what they valued most, the safety and freedom of all sentient beings who chose to stand with them against the darkness. On distant worlds, military planners would study this engagement and reach the same conclusion that had been whispered in coalition command centers since humanity joined the galactic community. When reinforcements were needed, 12 humans were more than enough. They were exactly what the situation required.